They say Hollywood would do anything for a ticket sale, even if it meant faking fainting spells, rigging coffins, or inventing scandals that bordered on criminal. But just how far did studios really go to turn movies into public spectacles? What's the strangest thing ever done to get you into a theater seat? Stick around, because some tricks from Tinseltown's past are still waiting to be unearthed. The Phantom Organist, Haunted Theater for Phantom of the Opera, 1925. For the premiere of The Phantom of the Opera, some theaters staged ghostly experiences worthy of the film's gothic chills. The most famous? A phantom organist hidden high in the rafters, playing eerie music before and during the film. Occasionally, the organ would let out a spine-tingling note at just the right moment, startling unsuspecting patrons. In other cities, actors dressed as the Phantom crept through the aisles, brushing cloaks against seats and sending shivers up spines. One theater even claimed its balcony was haunted for the run of the movie, encouraging stories of cold drafts and unexplained whispers. These haunted house tricks primed audiences for the terrors to come and turned a silent film into a living, breathing event. Gold Rush Nights for Charlie Chaplin's The Gold Rush, 1925. Charlie Chaplin was never shy about clever publicity, and for the Gold Rush, he transformed theaters into the Klondike. The most memorable stunt, Gold Rush Nights. Promoters hid painted pebbles of fool's gold in theater lobbies and beneath seats, promising that anyone who found one would win a prize, anything from candy and free tickets to the occasional real gold coin in select cities. Some theaters went even further, setting up pans and sandboxes in the lobby for children to strike it rich before the lights went down. Local newspapers covered the frantic rush, printing photos of happy winners and gleeful kids in newsboy caps. Chaplin's own publicity team stoked the excitement by mailing out Gold Rush certificates to early ticket buyers. The effect was electric. Audiences flooded in for the chance to win, and everyone left with a story to tell. The promotion turned Chaplin's comedy into an interactive adventure, blurring the lines between movie magic and real-life treasure hunts. Gold Rush Nights proved that with the right gimmick, even silent films could roar louder than the competition, one golden nugget at a time. Funeral Riots and The Lady in Black, Valentino's Death, 1926. Few promotions blurred the line between reality and performance, like the aftermath of Rudolph Valentino's untimely death. In August 1926, the world's first true screen heartthrob died suddenly at just 31, sending fans into hysteria. But the spectacle didn't end at the grave. Paramount and a web of publicists recognized an opportunity. Valentino's funeral would be an event, a moment to burnish his legend in the public's imagination forever. Over 100,000 people crowded the streets of New York, desperate for a glimpse of their idol one last time. Police struggled to keep order. There were reports of riots, faintings, and even suicide attempts. The press feasted on every detail, but the myth grew even stranger with the appearance of the mysterious lady in black, a veiled woman who mourned silently at Valentino's tomb. Whether she was a genuine mourner or a studio plant is still debated, but the result was pure movie magic. Each year, the Lady in Black would return, fanning rumors of lost love and undying devotion, and each year, the media breathlessly reported her appearance. The studio never discouraged the spectacle. In fact, they quietly encouraged it, knowing that Valentino's enduring tragedy was box office gold. The Lady in Black became an annual ritual, proof that in Hollywood, even grief could be staged if it meant keeping a star's name on everyone's lips. In death, Valentino became immortal, thanks in no small part to the citywide circus that played out at his grave. The Singalong Nights for the Jazz Singer, 1927. When The Jazz Singer made history as the first feature-length film with synchronized dialogue and musical numbers, Warner Brothers knew it needed more than just a technical hook. It needed spectacle. In select cities, they launched Singalong Nights to turn moviegoing into a communal experience. Lyric sheets for Toot Toot Tootsie were handed out at the door, and live bands played before and after screenings, encouraging the crowd to join in. Sometimes, ushers staged mini-talent contests, awarding movie passes to the best Al Jolson impersonators in the crowd. The theaters erupted with voices, laughter, and applause, not just for the film, but for the feeling of being part of something bigger than oneself. Newspapers raved about the novelty, and lines wrapped around the block. This wasn't just a movie, it was a musical event that swept the country. The sing-along stunts helped propel the jazz singer into legend, making every screening feel like a one-night-only concert. Audiences didn't just remember seeing the first talkie, they remembered singing along with it, proof that sometimes the best promotions invite everyone to become a star, if only for a night. Publicity by Scandal, Fatty Arbuckle, 1921. In the Roaring '20s, no Hollywood scandal was bigger or more ruthlessly exploited than the rise and fall of Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle. Once a beloved comedian and the highest-paid star of his era, Arbuckle's world collapsed after he was accused of a crime so salacious it made international headlines. As rumors of guilt, innocence, and everything in between swirled, the press transformed Arbuckle into a living cautionary tale. Studios, wary of public backlash, blacklisted him outright, yet the public's morbid fascination only grew. When Arbuckle eventually returned to the business under the pseudonym William Goodrich, some theaters quietly played up his banned status, capitalizing on the idea that watching his films was an act of rebellion. The shadow of his scandal became a marketing tool in itself, with whispers of Arbuckle's involvement ensuring a steady trickle of curious moviegoers. Even as his career never fully recovered, the industry learned a dark lesson. Sometimes, the stink of controversy could sell just as many tickets as the sweet smell of success. Arbuckle's tragedy proved that in Hollywood, fame and infamy are two sides of the same coin, and both could be spun for box office gold. His story would echo in future scandals, as studios and promoters realized that nothing drew a crowd quite like a reputation in ruins. The Mystery Guest, Stunt for Dracula, 1931. When Universal Pictures rolled out Dracula, some theaters took the creeping horror angle to a new level with a mystery guest stunt. Unbeknownst to the crowd, a local actor or theater employee dressed as Count Dracula would slip into the audience during the film's tensest scenes. Suddenly, a scream would erupt from the back row, or a pale hand would reach out from the shadows, causing genuine panic, and sometimes minor chaos. Managers would quickly assure everyone it was part of the fun, but by then, the story had already traveled through the neighborhood. The stunt was so successful that for weeks afterward, moviegoers would glance nervously over their shoulders just in case. Universal leaned into the rumors, letting the myth grow, knowing that a scared audience is a ticket-buying audience. Giant ape on Broadway for King Kong, 1933. Before King Kong stomped across the silver screen, he took over New York in a spectacle no one could ignore. In a move equal parts showmanship and sheer madness, promoters floated a 50-foot balloon gorilla over Broadway for the film's premiere. The sight of a gigantic ape drifting above the city was more than an ad. It was an invitation to stop, stare, and be awed. Traffic slowed to a crawl, crowds formed on the sidewalks, and flashbulbs popped as photographers scrambled to capture the wild scene. The balloon loomed over Times Square, larger than life, embodying the movie's promise of thrills beyond imagination. The genius wasn't just in the balloon, but in how it fed the hype. People who'd never even considered seeing a monster movie suddenly found themselves swept up in the buzz. Everyone was talking about the giant ape in the sky. Studios of the era understood something modern marketers sometimes forget: spectacle sells, and nothing beats an unforgettable visual. By the time King Kong finally roared onto screens, the city was primed for an event, not just a film. The balloon stunt turned a movie premiere into a citywide phenomenon, proving that sometimes the best way to promote fantasy is to make it real, if only for an afternoon on Broadway. Decades later, that giant ape remains a symbol of how far Hollywood will go to turn heads and fill seats. Ghost tickets for The Invisible Man, 1933. Promotion in the Golden Age wasn't just about posters or radio spots. It was about experience, and The Invisible Man proved just how playful and eerie those experiences could be. For certain showings, theaters gave away ghost tickets, a tangible token only the brave would dare accept. These tickets, printed on translucent paper and stamped with ghostly images, were rumored to be visible only to those unafraid of what they might encounter in the dark. The idea was delightfully theatrical, a movie about an unseen terror, marketed with a keepsake that almost wasn't there. Audiences treasured these tickets, some even claiming they brought good or bad luck, depending on whether you made it through the film unscathed. The ghost ticket became a collector's item and a dare among friends. Were you bold enough to sit through the suspense with only a slip of ghostly paper as your shield? Theaters sometimes reported selling out just because word spread that ghost tickets would be offered that night. It was a masterstroke in low-cost, high-impact marketing, one that made the film feel like a rite of passage. Even decades later, collectors seek out these ephemeral souvenirs, evidence that the real magic of the movies isn't always on the screen. Sometimes it's in the stories audiences carry home, about the night they braved the invisible, clutching a ticket that felt more like a charm than a stub. Hedy Lamar's Ecstasy, Fake Faintings, 1933. By the early 1930s, Hollywood had already learned the value of manufactured scandal, but nothing prepared audiences for the firestorm around Ecstasy, starring the strikingly beautiful Hedy Lamarr. Banned in several countries and condemned by religious groups, the film became infamous for its nude scenes and overt sensuality, an unprecedented provocation in American cinemas. But what really made Ecstasy a box office sensation wasn't just the content, it was the theater's playbook. Promoters hired actors to faint or storm out of showings in outrage, creating a feedback loop of shock and curiosity. Ads screamed, "strictly adults only," and newspapers reported on so-called fainting spells and moral outrage as if they were front-page news. For Lamarr, the attention was a double-edged sword. Her talent was often overshadowed by the film's notoriety. But the plan worked. People flocked to see what could possibly warrant such a fuss, and the movie's forbidden reputation drove demand even higher. What started as a European art film became a sensation that Hollywood couldn't ignore, setting a template for how controversy could be carefully cultivated, packaged, and sold. Fake faintings and stage scandals became tools of trade, and Ecstasy went down in history as a case study in how outrage, real or staged, could be the most effective advertisement of all. Gone with the Wind, 1939, the national Scarlett O'Hara look-alike contest. When Gone with the Wind was prepared for its monumental release, producer David O. Selznick and MGM created a publicity stunt on a scale never seen before, the nationwide Scarlett O'Hara look-alike contest. For months, local newspapers across America urged women to send in photos, appear at department stores, and parade at movie theaters in homemade hoop skirts and bonnets. The promise? The winner might be considered for a walk-on role in the film, or at least be named their city's own Scarlett. MGM sent talent scouts, and the contest made headlines coast to coast. In Atlanta, the contest was a citywide obsession, culminating in public events, newspaper spreads, and even a staged Scarlet Ball. The result was thousands of women and girls participating, huge local buzz, and relentless media coverage, all building anticipation for the premiere. Even though Vivian Leigh had already been cast, the studio's willingness to let fans dream and dress the part turned Gone with the Wind into an event before the film ever screened. The contest cemented the movie's place in pop culture and made every opening night feel like the social event of the year. Howard Hughes, Outlaw, Stunt, 1943. In the annals of Hollywood audacity, Howard Hughes's marketing for The Outlaw is in a class by itself. Hughes, already infamous for his obsessive perfectionism and larger-than-life eccentricities, had a vision for Jane Russell that went far beyond the silver screen. He didn't just direct her, he engineered her image, literally. Unsatisfied with how Russell's curves appeared on film, Hughes personally designed a bra intended to revolutionize her silhouette. The device became almost as famous as the movie itself, but the real masterstroke was how he spun controversy into pure box office gold. Hughes plastered America with provocative posters featuring Russell reclining in hay, daring censors to take notice. The result was instant scandal. Cities across the country banned the film, newspapers thundered about indecency, and church groups protested outside theaters. But that outrage was exactly what Hughes wanted. With every ban and every headline, the curiosity only grew. People lined up to catch a glimpse of what had caused such a stir. Hughes fought and courted the censors, using every delay to drum up more buzz. By the time The Outlaw finally hit wide release, it was infamous. Jane Russell became a star, and the film turned a profit despite all the hurdles. Hughes proved that in Hollywood, sometimes bad publicity isn't just good, it's genius. The bra was eventually dropped for comfort, but the legend endured, cementing The Outlaw as one of cinema's most scandalously promoted pictures, and Hughes as the ultimate showman. Bizarre warning. Bells for Frankenstein, 1931. The arrival of Frankenstein in 1931 was a cinematic event, so chilling, theaters wanted you to be sure you were ready. Universal Studios arranged for an extra layer of drama. Warning bells would ring before the film's most terrifying scenes. Ushers, often dressed in white lab coats, paraded the aisles with smelling salts in hand, theatrically preparing the audience for the horrors ahead. In some venues, local nurses or doctors were on standby, ready to tend to the faint of heart. This medical theater was pure showmanship, but the newspapers loved it, running stories about overwhelmed patrons and the lengths theaters went to in order to protect them. At a time when horror movies were still new and the production code was just beginning to flex its muscle, these flourishes were both marketing gold and a wink at the public's appetite for the forbidden. The campaign worked. The fear of the unknown, amplified by every bell, every warning, every flash of a white coat, became as much a part of the experience as the film itself. Audiences lined up for their dose of cinematic terror, secretly hoping they'd be the ones to survive without incident. Frankenstein was a sensation, and its creative theatrical promotions set the stage for a new era of immersive moviegoing, proving that sometimes the scariest things happen before the lights even go down. Blood Red Fountains. Creature from the Black Lagoon, 1954. When Universal Studios wanted to make a splash, literally, for Creature from the Black Lagoon, they knew subtlety wouldn't cut it. For the film's much-anticipated premiere at Grauman's Chinese Theater, they dyed the fountains outside a lurid shade of blood red. The result was impossible to ignore. As the sun set over Hollywood Boulevard, water gushed and bubbled like fresh gore, drawing gasps from passers-by and photographers alike. The effect was shocking, theatrical, and irresistible. Reporters rushed to the scene, and within hours, the bizarre sight was front-page news. Crowds gathered, drawn by curiosity and a little morbid fascination, wondering if the rumors of aquatic monsters and the cinematic terrors within could possibly live up to the spectacle outside. Universal leaned into the drama, encouraging stories that blurred the line between movie and myth. Patrons attending the premiere found themselves part of an event that felt more like a carnival sideshow than a typical movie night. The red fountains were more than just a gimmick. They were a reminder that in the golden age, Hollywood's promotional flair knew no bounds. The film itself became a box office hit, buoyed by the buzz of its blood-soaked debut. And while the water ran clear by the next morning, the legend of the red fountains endures, proof that sometimes, to lure audiences into the unknown, you have to paint the town in the colors of your wildest dreams. Life Insurance for Macabber, 1958. It's hard to imagine buying a movie ticket that comes with a life insurance policy, but in 1958, William Castle made the macabre part of the marketing. Macabber was a low-budget thriller with one big, irresistible hook. Every ticket holder was insured for $1,000, by Lloyd's of London no less, against death by fright. Nurses in crisp, white uniforms waited in theater lobbies. A hearse idled outside, and Castle himself would sometimes take the stage to warn audiences of the dangers ahead. It was showmanship in its purest, and most theatrical, form. The newspapers lapped it up, reporting on every nervous faint and every ambulance call, real or staged. Castle's promotion worked because it turned moviegoing into a dare. Audiences wondered, would they make it through alive? Would someone drop dead mid-scream? The insurance certificates themselves became collector's items, and the spectacle of the stunt overshadowed the movie's modest production values. Castle's gamble paid off spectacularly. Macabber became a hit, not because it was the scariest film ever made, but because it became an event. Castle had tapped into the primal thrill of fear, and the equally primal thrill of survival, and wrapped it in a press release. The insurance may have been a gimmick, but the chills and the ticket sales were very real. In the end, no one died, but Castle's legend as the king of showbiz stunts was sealed forever. The Emergo Skeleton, House on Haunted Hill, 1959. William Castle was never content to simply frighten his audience from the screen. He wanted to grab them by the shoulders and shake them. For House on Haunted Hill, starring Vincent Price at his campy, chilling best, Castle invented the Emergo gimmick. Here's how it worked. At the film's most suspenseful moment, a glowing skeleton would suddenly swoop out from behind the screen and fly over the heads of the audience, suspended on wires. For moviegoers used to the passive ritual of sitting in the dark, it was a shocking, immersive jolt. Some ducked, others screamed, and a few ran for the exits, convinced the supernatural had come for them. Theaters were packed, and word spread quickly that this wasn't just another haunted house story, it was an experience. Critics scoffed at the spectacle, but Castle's box office numbers spoke for themselves. He understood that in an age before social media, the surest way to make a movie unforgettable was to give people something to talk about the next day. Emergo wasn't just a gimmick. It was a promise that anything could happen in the dark, and everyone wanted to see what came next. Castle's hands-on approach to promotion blurred the line between cinema and live theater, making House on Haunted Hill a sensation, and setting a new standard for creative movie marketing that others would try, and usually fail, to top. Tragedy as promotion. The Misfits, 1961. Some legends are forged in the fires of real-life heartbreak, and few films carry a legacy as haunted as The Misfits. Originally intended as a showcase for Marilyn Monroe, Clark Gable, and Montgomery Clift, the film's on-set chaos and tragic aftermath turned its release into a dark fascination. By the time The Misfits hit theaters, Gable had died from a heart attack, possibly brought on by the grueling desert shoot and his insistence on doing his own stunts. Monroe, already teetering on the edge, was hospitalized for exhaustion, and less than 2 years later, she too was dead from a drug overdose. Clift, deeply addicted and in declining health, died not long after. Instead of shying away from this cloud, the studio leaned into the narrative. Whispered rumors of a cursed production became part of the film's draw. Midnight showings played up the tragedy. Posters took on a somber, almost reverent tone, and audiences came not just for the story on screen, but for the real-life drama woven into every frame. Critics and fans debated whether the film was haunted by fate, bad luck, or something more sinister. In the end, The Misfits became less about the movie itself and more about the price its stars paid, ensuring it a place in Hollywood legend, forever remembered as a production that blurred the line between fiction and the devastating realities of stardom. Bette Davis versus Joan Crawford feud hype. If the movies taught us anything, it's that nothing sells like a good rivalry, and no feud was as legendary as the one between Bette Davis and Joan Crawford. By the time Whatever Happened to Baby Jane hit theaters in 1962, the actress's animosity had become as famous as their performances. The studio didn't just tolerate the drama, it poured gasoline on the fire, feeding stories of on-set sabotage, backstabbing, and bitter insults to gossip columnists hungry for fresh dirt. Fan magazines published lurid reports about Davis kicking Crawford in the head or Crawford filling her costume with weights to torment Davis's aching back. The public ate it up, turning the film's release into a national event. Moviegoers arrived at theaters primed not only for the twisted psychological drama on screen, but for the real-life battle playing out behind the scenes. The rivalry didn't end with the final reel. When Davis received an Oscar nomination and Crawford didn't, Crawford arranged to accept the award on behalf of any other nominee who might win, then strode onto the stage herself. The spectacle was irresistible, a living soap opera that kept the box office humming. Studios took note. Sometimes, the best marketing is simply letting two stars do what they do best, compete for the spotlight, one headline at a time. Insurance Against Fright for The Tingler, 1959. William Castle, always a master of the macabre, outdid himself with The Tingler. Never one for understatement, Castle promised audiences they would experience real terror, so much so that select theaters installed Percepto, hidden buzzers rigged beneath certain seats. At just the right moment, when the on-screen monster escaped into the movie theater itself, those seats would vibrate with a sudden jolt. Audiences shrieked, leapt, and grabbed each other in the dark, unsure if the tingling sensation was a prank or proof that something supernatural was in their midst. Castle didn't stop there. He offered fright insurance to moviegoers, complete with a certificate that guaranteed a payout if the film proved too much for their nerves. Nurses stood by in the aisles, ready to revive the overwhelmed, while Castle himself sometimes emerged before the show to offer warnings and stoke anticipation. Critics rolled their eyes, but audiences loved it. The gimmick made The Tingler a can't-miss event, transforming a run-of-the-mill B-movie into a cult sensation. Castle's genius was in understanding that the experience, the ritual of screaming, laughing, and maybe just surviving, was what people would remember. His brand of showmanship blurred the boundary between movie and reality, setting a gold standard for interactive, over-the-top promotion that would inspire generations of filmmakers and marketers alike. Live Alligators for the Alligator People, 1959. B-movies were made to stand out, and in the late 1950s, nothing said stand out like a live alligator chained up outside your local theater. When the Alligator People hit the screens, promoters went all in on the reptilian theme, sometimes even borrowing live alligators from local zoos or traveling animal acts. Caged just outside the box office, the creatures served as a living, snapping billboard for the film's bizarre premise. The message to would-be ticket buyers was clear. If you're brave enough to pass the gator, you might just be brave enough for what's inside. Kids dared each other to get close, parents shook their heads, and the spectacle drew out the curious by the dozens. Theaters would even encourage the local press to cover the animal's arrival, making the premiere an event that went far beyond the movie itself. Sometimes, employees would don alligator costumes, chasing after giggling children or posing for staged attacks. It was part carnival, part horror, and all about getting bodies in the seats. The actual film may have faded into B-movie obscurity, but the promotional stunt left a mark, both in the memories of those who dared to approach the real-life monsters and in the annals of Hollywood's most offbeat marketing ideas. It was the kind of spectacle that only a town built on spectacle could pull off, a reminder that, for a time, movie magic began before you even walked through the doors. Adults Only, Hype and the Band in Boston Craze, Baby Doll, 1956. When Elia Kazan's Baby Doll hit theaters in 1956, Hollywood saw one of its most notorious adults-only rollouts. Starring Carol Baker as a child bride in a steamy Southern drama, the film instantly sparked outrage from the Catholic Legion of Decency and was banned in cities across the country, most famously banned in Boston, a phrase that quickly became a badge of cinematic honor. Studios leaned into the uproar, printing "For Adults Only" on posters and daring audiences to judge for themselves what was so scandalous inside. In cities where the film was pulled from theaters, clandestine midnight showings cropped up, and local press fanned the flames with breathless headlines about indecency on screen. Even church leaders' calls for boycotts became free publicity, drawing curious moviegoers who wanted to see what the fuss was about. Theaters sold out night after night, with lines stretching around the block, as Baby Doll proved that controversy and the thrill of the forbidden were sometimes the best box office strategies. The result? The film became a hit, not despite its adults-only label, but because of it, showing once again that in Hollywood, nothing sells like a little scandal and a warning label. Hollywood never played by the rules, and neither did its wildest promoters. Behind every classic film was a stunt designed to blur the line between fantasy and reality, daring us to question what was real and what was pure spectacle. So, next time you settle into a darkened theater, remember, some of cinema's boldest moments happened before the opening credits. Who knows? The wildest stories might still be out there, waiting to be believed.